All right, so today we're going to talk about the Counter-Reformation. When we talk about the Counter-Reformation, what you have to understand is that the Protestant Reformation has already occurred. We have people breaking away from the Catholic Church. There's a problem. There's a problem with the Catholic Church. There's corruption. There's indulgences. And people have started to read the Bible for themselves because there's mass printing of it. Martin Luther's going to say things like, hey, the Pope is not the head of the church. Jesus is. You can have your own personal relationship. And people are going to really latch on to this idea and leave the Catholic Church. So when we talk about counter, the word counter, think about if someone was to sue Miss Cannon and I didn't like that they were suing me and I was upset about it, or I thought it was wrong, and so Miss Cannon might countersue. What does that mean? That means that I would try to get back at them and sue them back. What is going to happen with the Counter-Reformation is that we've already had the Protestant Reformation. The Protestants have protested and broken away from the Catholic Church. And what you will have is that the Catholic Church is going to try to reform and change their ways. Remember, reform means to improve, change, or remake. And they're going to try to counteract what the Protestant Reformation has done to the Christian society. Does that make sense? So when we talk about the Counter-Reformation, it is the response to the Protestant Reformation. You may want to make a note even underneath this that it is a to counteract and to bring people back to the church. You probably want to make a note of that. On your paper where it says Counter-Reformation in large, you need to, like, it's real big, there's an arrow that points off. This is where this text goes right here. All right, moving on. So, of course, you're going to have people who are early reformers for the Catholic Church or for the Catholic Counter-Reformation, and we're going to talk about this just like you had early reformers for the Protestant movement. The first person is going to be Savonarola. He is going to actually preach these fiery sermons against the Catholic Church, okay? He's going to call on the church. He's going to say, listen, you guys need to take that gold and silver that you've built these statues with, and let's buy some bread and feed the hungry and the poor because they need these. And this is what Christ would want, is for you to help thy neighbor. So always, we've talked about this extensively the last few days, is that the church has an issue because they're taking money, and instead of doing service for people in the community and bringing them into their church and bringing more people to Christianity, they are building gold statues. He's going to lead the bonfire of the vanities. When we talk about vanities, the root word you want to think of is kind of like vain, or the luxuries of life, okay? And he's going to be very against those luxuries because they pull you away from God. Also, excommunicated. He will be excommunicated, which you know because you looked the word up yesterday. The excommunicated means to be exiled from your religious group of people, your church, and those areas, okay? And then the Pope is going to see him as dangerous, so he gets executed in 1498, okay? Now remember, Savonarola is going to be spreading these ideas. He's going to say, listen, Catholic Church, reform, change your ways, okay? And the church is going to be like, oh my gosh, you need to chill out. So they're going to eventually kick him out of the church, but then they're also going to execute him, okay? Trying to eliminate the problem. Now, if you've learned anything in world history, and I know you know this, and I know I say this every single time, but you know that in world history, when people try to squash an idea or squash a movement and get rid of it or kill people, that usually after that occurs, that the movement ends up blowing up. And Savonarola's message, just because he dies, does not mean it's not going to carry on, and you need to keep that in mind. This is Savonarola. He does look a little, a little creepy, a little bit, but he was a good man and he had a good cause. All right, moving on. The Jesuits, okay? And make sure that you are listening and you are filling in your boxes. So fill in your boxes, but make sure you are listening to Miss Cannon's lecture. So if you need to pause it, write, and then listen, please do so. The Jesuits are going to be the Society of Jesus. And if you kind of look, you can see that Jesus is kind of at the beginning of this word right here. They're going to focus on Catholic spirituality and service. So the Jesuits are going to say, listen, we need to get more spiritual, we need to lay more into Christ, and we need to also serve the community, because to serve the community will bring more people into the Catholic Church and our Christian, like our faith, okay? So what you understand is that Ignatius of Loyola is going to start the Jesuit movement, and he's going to run it kind of like a military, okay? So when you think about military, what do you think about? Uniforms, boots, walking in a structured formation, marching, things like that. He is going to emphasize discipline, and obedience. Obedience, root word is obey, so directions, following directions. And discipline is being structured and being able to follow rules, take direction, and maintain your composure. So what you need to understand is that he's going to emphasize on discipline and obedience, but to the church above all things, okay? Also, he's going to take education and he's going to use it to combat Protestantism. So he's going to be against Protestantism. He's going to try to focus back on the Catholic Church. Also, he will establish missions. Missions are like when you hear people who attend church and they go to Puerto Rico and they build a church. Mission work, if you've ever heard that, that's where people go to areas that they are unfamiliar with and spread their beliefs and their cause in a, how do I say this, in a good way, okay? They help people, they feed people, they build them houses, and they say, this is, God blessed you with this house, and he allowed us to build it for you. Also, he's going to create schools and universities. So when we talk about Georgetown University, you ever heard of it? Jesuits, okay? I'm trying to think, there's two other ones, but I can't remember right now. But universities, even now, are from the Jesuits, okay? Universities, like where you get your education, okay? Ignatius right here. What do you notice about, if you're looking at this picture, like what do you see around his head? You notice the halo, and then there's Jesus on the crucifix in the background. This is all very symbolic, and you have to understand that they're trying to portray him in a good light. He has a holy vibe going on, okay? Council of Trent. So what's going to happen, and if you know what a council is, it's a group of people that meet. Council of Trent is going to begin, it's going to be created by Pope Paul III in 1545, and they met and on and off until about 1563. What these guys are going to do, and this is a big point, and you need to write this down, but you probably want to highlight it, is that they're going to propose, like their purpose was to examine the criticisms made by the Protestants, okay? So they're like, this is what Martin Luther said we're doing wrong. This is what other people are saying we're doing wrong in our church. And we need to fix the teachings and the practices in our church because we're not doing something right. This whole Reformation that the Protestants started and moved away and broke away from our church was because we were doing something wrong. So we need to figure it out. So what they're going to do, a couple of things. They're going to address the corruption of the clergy. They're going to address the training of the priest and the financial abuse. So when you talk about financial abuse, they're going to talk about indulgences, which is right then a point underneath, and they're going to get rid of indulgences because that money was taken to build artwork, put artwork in the church and make the church elaborate and beautiful instead of it feeding people on the street. Also, you cannot promise as an individual that somebody else will not go to hell. That is not what the church is about. The church is offering help for you to maintain and to obtain your salvation, but they cannot fully promise something like that. Also, what they're going to do is they're going to abolish the sale of indulgences. They're going to reject, though, the Protestant emphasis on self-discipline and individual faith. So when we talk about self-discipline, you prevent your own sin and you try to live upright and well, and you don't need to rely on the church for that type of guidance. The Catholic Church isn't going to like that. Also, individual faith. They're not going to believe that you can have your own personal relationship with Christ without the church, okay? And remember that Martin Luther is going to say, you can have your own relationship. You need to read the Bible on your own and get to know God for yourself. And yes, you can still go to church, but please have something of your own at home, because what you have to remember about the Renaissance in general is that it is a whole, it's all about the individual. Humanism, secularism, all of it is all about the individual. And Martin Luther is going to bring that humanism aspect into it and say, you need to figure it out for yourself. Still have your faith in your religion, but figure it out on your own. Now, the significance of the Council of Trent, big deal. What is going to happen is that even though the Council of Trent is going to reform and change and remake and, improve the Catholic Church, they're not going to compromise with the Protestants. They're not going to be like, hey, you love Jesus, we love Jesus, let's shake on it and get over it. It's not going to happen. They are going to continue to fight. There is going to be a continuation of violence against each other, which, if you remember the other day, we talked about that it's a little wild to see two groups of Christians killing and fighting each other when they're supposed to believe in the same God and the same Son of God, who are not big on destroying fellow Christians, okay? So just remember that the Protestants and the Catholics, it's not going to resolve anything between them, but the Council of Trent will help revamp and, reconstruct or reform the Catholic Church. That's why it's the Counter-Reformation, okay? Because they're changing things too. Here's the Council of Trent. You can see there's cardinals and priests and the clergy are all lined up, and they're all discussing and deciding what to do for the Catholic Church and how to reform it. The next thing, women and the church, okay? So chicks during this time, women are going to kind of get more involved. So in the Middle Ages, nuns, you remember like nuns who were in the church and Vikings used to raid and, oh no, take our stuff. Well, nuns during the Middle Ages, they were devoted to the church. They took care of the poor, the orphaned. Orphan means like you have no parents, like children whose parents had died like from the plague. And they took care of the sick. Well, Teresa of Avila in the Renaissance is going to follow her own regimen of fasting, prayer, and sleep. So she lays out her own regimen of fasting. Fasting means that you sacrifice either drinking water or eating or something for your faith. Also, you know what prayer is and you know what sleep is. So she just lays out her own regimen, which is her own independence. And the church is eventually going to say, Teresa, you have a great relationship with God, and we can tell that you really believe in our Catholic Church. So can you help us reform and change our ways, okay? And Teresa Avila is going to have fervor, which fervor means that she has a passion and a love, okay? And so she's going to say that she has seen these visions of Christ and that Christ has told her to remain loyal to the Catholic Church and to help them reform and change their ways. And, people believe Teresa because she had such a tight regimen of fasting and prayer and sleep, and she was as a nun, she was devoted to God. That was her husband. So people are going to say, Teresa Avila has stuck by the Catholic Church. She's so spiritual, and it is inspiring me to stay at the Catholic Church because women like her are in tune with God, and they are still at the Catholic Church worshiping. So a lot of the Teresa Avila is going to inspire many women to stick with the church. So here's a painting of her. What are you noticing about the artwork? Because I'm noticing a little pattern here. I'll give you a second to think about it. One thing you need to notice about the Catholic Reformation artwork and these individuals who are dealing with the Reformation is there's always this light and this glow, which is kind of symbolic, and there's always like a crucifix in the background, which is showing like, first of all, there's a holiness going on here where Teresa Avila has this light shining on her from God. Then there's Jesus in the background, which is symbolic of Jesus, the Catholic Church, them worshiping, the Son of God. And also, usually these people have a book or a pen, and they're writing or they're doing something in these pictures that's showing that these people are educated. They are helping the reform movement, and it's trying to paint them in a good light, pun intended, because it's kind of funny painting them in a good light. But anyway, back to what I was saying. So when you notice this imagery, it's always this light shining on them, like God has picked them to be these reformers for the Catholic Church. And you need to understand that that is symbolism in this artwork, okay? There's another statue of Teresa Avila. Now, the Inquisition. Did you think it had gone away? Oh no, it's back, okay? So the Inquisition is going to occur again, and you learned in the Middle Ages that the Inquisition was like torture, and you need to worship the Catholic Church, and you can't speak out against it, and if you do, you're a heretic. And what was the big concept? Do you remember the word? If you're a heretic, then you're committing heresy. Very good. Now, the church court, what they are going to do is they're going to establish the church court is going to be established so that they can counter the Reformation, okay? So we're going to actually create a church court. You remember in the Middle Ages that there was a church court before, and they tried people and accused them of being guilty, and then they would torture them for opposing the church. Well, same thing's pretty much going to happen here. People are going to get accused of being witches or Protestants, which, guys, you guys have figured out Protestants worship Jesus. They love God. They have broken away from the Catholic Church. And if you are opposing the Catholic Church, then you are a heretic. So even Protestants are said as, quote-unquote, like heretics, even though they're worshiping Jesus and their beliefs, their practices are very similar to the Catholic Church. It's just they don't like the sale of indulgences and things like that. So Also, people who broke away from church law, broke the church law, heretic. Inquisition. So understand that the Inquisition is going to come back in Europe. The Spanish, they are going to have an even harsher Inquisition, and it's called the Spanish Inquisition, okay? They're going to use this to impose religious uniformity. This word, what is the root word there? Do you see it? It's uniform, which means that religiously, the Spanish want religions to be uniform across the board. Why do you wear uniforms at school every day? So that you guys look similar, so there's no discrimination or differences in your appearance. Why do the Spanish want a religious uniformity? Because they want one predominant religion, and that's going to be the Christian branch of Catholic. Like, they want people to be Catholic. They do not want Jews or Muslims or Protestants in their country. So they will attack these people. Also, any form of rebellion, which at this time you have to understand is that rebellion is going to be, if you speak out against the church, if you say anything that's different, ideals that do not go with the church are going to be considered rebellious text or books, okay? And what they're going to create is an index of forbidden books, which is like, it's kind of like, you know how we have banned book lists now where you like have books that people can't read in high school and you got to wait till you get grown up to read it. Well, they kind of stamp out books, like certain books that speak out against the church or get people to have too much individuality and think for themselves. So that's what the Spanish are going to do. And actually, the whole Inquisition movement is going to do this. Now, people will be told not to read these books that they have banned, or they would lose their souls. So what you have to understand is that these people are taking this concept of banning these books to stop the spread of movements and rebellions and education, and they're going to tell them, if you read this book, you will lose your soul. That's to strike fear in people, because when people fear something, they won't go towards it. They won't do it. All right, so you've already seen some torture, like the Iron Maiden. Remember, we talked about how it was kind of like the Trunchbull putting Matilda in the chokey, okay? And you can see right here, people who are chained up. Now, there are going to be a couple of effects from the Reformations, okay? The first effect is going to be that there are many factions of Christianity. And if you look here, you can see you have Jesus, Judaism, the Holy Catholic, and Apostolic Church. Then you have Martin Luther, the Great Schisms. Remember the Great Schisms were when the popes were fighting? Like, I'm Pope, no, you're Pope. No, the Pope lives in Rome. No, he doesn't. You have Eastern Orthodox, which deals with Russian, Greek, Coptic, and Armenian. Then you have the Reformers, which, see, if you have Lutheran right here, Moravian, Covenant, Free, Baptist. When you have the Radical Reformers, you have the Mennonites, which are kind of like, they're like Amish people. Then you have the Anglican right here, Anglican, Episcopal, Roman, Catholic is kind of doing its own branch over here. And then you have the Methodist, Assembly of God, Holiness, okay? The Reformed will be the Quakers, the Baptists, the Congregational, the Universalists, and the Unitarians, and the Presbyterians. Remember, I told you Presbyterians are the individuals from Scotland who practiced the Protestant faith. So just keep that in mind, that all of these branches, and some of you may attend some of these churches that have Assembly of God in them, or Baptists, and these are all from these core ideas. Because why do we use a tree? Is because you have the roots and then you have all the branches. You get it? So remember, Judaism, Jesus, and then it goes from there. Okay? The next thing is going to happen is that because of the Reformation, because you have Protestants and Catholics not getting along and not agreeing, that you have Jews and Muslims will be viewed as heretics, okay, which, you know, those are people who go against the church. They will be forced to live in ghettos. See, a lot of people think ghetto is like a term that has been coined in the last 20 years. No, ghettos have been around for a long time, and I want you to make a note about ghettos right now, is that ghettos are when people of the same belief or culture are forced to live in one area. It's like one concentrated area, okay? Also, there will be an increase in witch hunts. A lot of people are going to be accused of witchcraft during this time because they are not necessarily following all the rituals and patterns of the Catholic Church. I thought you'd like that I put the Wicked Witch from the Wizard of Oz on there. But there's going to be an increase of witch hunts. And you have to understand during this time, too, if someone accuses you of being a witch, your neighbor, if they don't like you, you could, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be guilty and they're going to kill you or torture you, okay? The next thing, there will be an increase in nationalism. Please don't forget that the root word of nationalism is nation, which means that you have your own pride, you have a sense, and you love your country, and you relate to it and you understand. So when we talk about nationalism in Europe, you're going to deal with French people associating with France, people associated with the Holy Roman Empire. England loves English people. Scotland, like all of it is going to be, you love your nation, you have pride in it. What do you have pride in? What makes you have a sense of pride? What is pride, okay? You can have pride for being an American. That would be your sense of nationalism and your sense of loving your nation, loving where you live, okay? So I put those little pictures up there. Also, this will cause separation of church and state, which eventually in our nation, in America, we've never had church and state. We've never had a theocracy. We've always had a government that puts the church separately from the state. State matters dealing with the government. There is no religion in that, okay? And so, you know, with Reformation and with the Protestant Reformation, even the Counter-Reformation, it is going to cause the church and the state, as in government affairs, economy, all that, are going to be separated from the church. Religion is not going to come into play anymore. So remember how you learned about a theocracy, a government ruled by religion? They're going to, in Europe, they're going to move away from that, okay? Now, this is the end of your lecture. So, make sure that you, first and foremost, if you just wrote your notes down and you got to the end of this now and you're listening to my voice, what I would like for you to do is go back and completely listen to this video. Make sure that you listen thoroughly because you're not getting the lecture option from Miss Cannon like you usually do. So please listen to this video clearly. Yes, I want you to write your notes, but I also want you to listen to this. That's why I create these, okay? Please remember that you can stop, rewind, fast forward, do whatever you need to do. And I hope you have a wonderful class period today. All right. If you have any questions, make sure you ask Miss Cannon.